On today's episode of PJ and the Beard, we're doing another installment of what we're calling the interviews. And the Beard is going to tell you who we're interviewing today.
All right, great. So today on the show, we have Drew Swindle from Swindler Effects. I was worried. I got it, I think.
You got it.
So interesting story how we became connected a little bit here. We did a while back. When I say a while back, we've only been doing this for less than a year now. It's going to be a year in a couple of weeks. We did a video on your Red Mount tremolo.
Mm-hmm.
And in that video, Pat said something about the bass response. We were actually comparing it. So I had bought picked up a full tone Super Trem because I just wasn't sure about that pedal. And I wanted to try something else. And Pat said something about the bass response. And you came out, asked us what version it was. Make a long story short here. Asked us what version. We looked at the serial number. It was a very, very early pedal. You said, send it back. I sent it back. What'd you do? What was the problem?
It's just a couple of capacitor changes. We had some capacitors that were a little bit smaller value and some kind of critical parts in the circuit. And I typically like my guitar a little bit on the brighter side. So kind of in my rig, I didn't notice it as much. But then when I started kind of playing around with it more after I was getting some reports about it, I realized that we needed to kind of address that. And that was, I think, you had serial number somewhere in like 30 or 40. So it was like super early. So right after that, we made those simple tweaks and decided to do all the rest of them going forward that way. And I went back and retroactively fixed a lot of them that people maybe were mentioning that. But yours was one of those that slipped through the cracks, and the original owner never brought it up or asked to send it back in or anything. So, yeah, just a couple capacitors.
And so that's awesome. First of all, service, and just hats off to you guys for being willing to even do that. And it sounds great now.
Thanks.
I would hold it up, but it's as a testament, right? I'd hold it up, but I can't because it's on my pedal board at the church, and
nice.
Don't have it with me. The Super Trem is not on that board anymore. And
it is not.
Going to be
cool.
Probably find some reverb here very shortly if you'd like to pick one of those up. Nice. So yeah, I've been really happy with it. It really sounds great.
Excellent.
And I think we'll get into one of the things that drew me to that pedal in the first place was kind of the functionality of it. And I think we can get into that here pretty shortly. I thought what we would do first, for people that maybe aren't familiar with Swindler Effects and that are watching this, is just talk a little bit about what you guys are making over there and what you have to offer. I can hit a button here and pull up your storefront. So if you go to, let's see, swindlereffects.com, and we'll pull that up again here in a little bit. But if you go there, you'll find this storefront. So how do you want to do this, Drew? You want to just kind of run us through real quick, give us a basic idea, and then we can get maybe a deeper dive into some of the functionality, what I think makes these really special. But
yeah, I can give you kind of the quick sales pitch and kind of go through. It makes more sense to kind of go through in the order that they're created, so I'll do that. So we started off, when I started the company, we started off with the Iron Drive, the Magic City. The Iron Drive is an overdrive, the Magic City delay, and the Mineshaft Reverb. So the very first pedal I made was the Iron Drive overdrive, and it's TS-808 based. That's what it's modeled after. And I thought about releasing that pedal on its own, but I had concerns about releasing a brand new pedal company and our only pedal being a Tube Screamer clone. So I didn't want that, because then everyone would just ignore it. So we released all three of those pedals actually at the exact same time as like a launch. I had done a lot of custom shop work before that, random one-offs, building stuff for friends and friends of friends and people, more local people, I guess. But in like 2015 is when this kind of all started with like our own signature branded stuff, stuff that we could classify as our own. So the Iron Drive, TS-808 bass, but I separated the EQ into a bass and treble so that I could have more control over the EQ that way. I have a hard time with overdrives that only have a tone knob because, like I said, I kind of like my tone a little bit brighter and a little more clear. But I have trouble with tone knobs, because when I get it as bright as I want it, I lose all the fullness in the bass response. And I really want both, to be honest. So the 2-knob EQ is something that I wanted personally. And then 3-way clipping, no clipping, LED clipping, and then some silicone diode clipping. That's kind of the quick rundown of that guy. And then the Magic City is when I developed the Magic City, it was one of the few pedals that was that size that actually had tap tempo. This was quite a while ago, if you think about it. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't seem too long ago, but there weren't a ton of pedals that were this small with tap tempo. So that was a big goal of mine. It's a standard 2399 chip-based delay, so it's a digital delay, but it's got that analog sound, and it's got to be filtered pretty heavily to kind of give it this more dark, repeat sounding, and also to filter out some of the noise that happens with that chip. But the main goal behind this one was to just challenge myself to add tap tempo to that chip, which is fairly uncommon, and keep it in that form factor, and that was a big deal. So that was the whole idea behind that one. And then the Mineshaft, kind of in a similar vein, it's just kind of a standard built-in reverb brick reverb, which is pretty common. There's a lot of people that do that type of sound out there, but again, the way that I approach things, I want to get as much functionality out of something as possible. So I honestly, the design kind of came after I found those knobs, those dual concentric knobs that it has on there. I wanted to use those for something, and in the reverb, it made sense because I wanted some sort of like dual preset reverb. So with one foot switch click, you can swap between which knobs you're using, either the top or the bottom knobs, and basically have 2 different reverb settings, easily, instantly accessible. And then there's a couple of other features like holding down the bypass switch jumps it to like full oscillation, which is kind of a fun feature. So just kind of we're starting to kind of get a little more into the digital control side of things. This is technically an analog preset with the 2 sets of knobs, but we're kind of like getting into that digital control area. I'm trying to remember. I think right after that, I think was the workers' comp. I wanted to
That's a great
like that name.
That's fantastic. That might
That's
actually make me use a compressor, which I don't, which that'll be a discussion later. Maybe you can convince me, but that name alone might get the job done.
That's the number one comment I've got on it. I thought it was a no-brainer. It kind of fit our the way we kind of named our pedals. All of our pedals are kind of based off of this Birmingham industrialist kind of vibe. That's where all the names come from. They kind of expanded to Alabama based as we've gone on, but that's where they all started. All right. So the workers' comp was that industrial blue collar feel. But yeah, so that one it's kind of a revamping of the Dynacomp Ross type circuit, but it's kind of configured in a different way. It gets squishy if you want it to, but I use compressors just to add sustain. I don't like to kill my dynamics. I don't want that chicken picking country style stuff, and to lose a lot of clarity and to get that kind of snappy twang. So it's the compressor knob on this one actually acts like a blend control. So it actually like blends the compressed signal into your dry signal. So that way you can get kind of the best of both worlds. So you can get that sustain and control it that way. Without losing all your picking dynamics and stuff. And we added the bright switch in there to kind of bring some of that high-end clarity back that you can lose at kind of more extreme compressed settings. So
that sounds great, because we've only tried compressors a couple times on the show, and every time we feel compelled to like, can we chicken pick? And neither one of us can chicken pick. So we're like, why are we going to use a compressor? Because it just squishes everything. That sounds great. That sounds great.
I really run it pretty minor. I run the compression at like 10 o'clock and the level wherever it needs to be back at Unity. Yeah. And so it's pretty low in there, but it's one of those, if you're doing swells in the praise and worship world and you're you got a lot of kind of delay and reverb and you're holding out long single note lead line type stuff, you really notice it because it extends your sustain, but you don't lose that picking dynamics, which is what I was all about. So
that's great.
That was the whole idea behind that. So those were the first four, and then things really like kind of take a turn, and we get into the Red Mountain. And the Red Mountain, the version 1 that you guys demoed, was our biggest endeavor. It's still, I mean, it holds up against the chorus, but it's still one of the biggest endeavors jumping into that whole digital control side of things. So most of the controls on that and most of the features in that are controlled by like a computer chip. And what that allows us to do is to, do stuff like presets and really fine tune, control some things, and some external control features with kind of different expression setups and favorites and all that kind of stuff. So the version 1 was kind of the small step into that, I guess you could say. Again, in that same form factor with a stereo trim, tap tempo in the same enclosure size was a big deal. And the reason I made actually this pedal in the first place was I had a couple of places where I needed tremolo, and if I'm going to design something, I wanted it to do everything that you would feasibly want a tremolo pedal to do. Everything that I could think of that I would ever want a tremolo pedal to do, I wanted to fit it in this pedal and not take up a lot of space. Because at the end of the day, tremolo, for the most part, is not like the staple of many people's sound. It's kind of a little glitter on top, I guess you will. You don't use it all the time, so I didn't want to devote, half my board to a large. Because I was looking at like the EHX, like stereo pulsar and stuff. Like that one rivals it in functionality, but it's like 3 times as wide. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I wasn't about to devote that much of my board to tremolo, given how much I used it. So the whole idea was to fit as much as I possibly could to cover every possibility of tremolo in that same size enclosure.
And I'd say you're pretty successful at that.
Yeah, there were a couple of things in the version 1 that I had to leave out just due to the way we were building things at the time. All the version 1s of everything was hand-built, hand-populated, through-hole components, like all your kind of buzzwords for your boutique hand-built companies. And those pieces are just larger. And no matter how kind of clever I got with circuit board routing and stuff, I could only fit so much in there. So we might get into that a little bit more later. But when we went to the version 2s, we totally changed how our products are manufactured and how they're built. Went to a smaller technology that I could finally get everything that I wanted out of it. But I'll do a little blurb about the V2 updates because they kind of encompass the whole line after I guess we go through the rest of them. But so yeah, I guess after the Red Mountain, it gets a little fuzzy. I think we did the Nexus after the Red Mountain technically, and the Nexus in that similar vein is something that I wanted but couldn't find. The Nexus is a programmable loop switcher, so it's not a recording and playback looper. It's a signal routing looper, and it's 4 channels, so you can control 4 different pedals. And everything that I saw on the market was either massive and expensive and power hungry, or it was just dumb. It was a dumb switcher. Like it
sounds like a dictator.
Yeah, well, it didn't. It's either big and power hungry and expensive
and dumb.
or the other side of it was they had no programming capabilities. What I would call the dumb switchers. So I really wanted something that was the middle ground. There was no middle ground that I could find. Disaster Area had some really good options. They're like 8 loopers at the time, 8 loops, but still they're in, your really wide enclosure. And while this enclosure is actually technically real estate wise smaller than all of our other pedals. So what I wanted personally was something that was like 4 or 5 channels, programmable, so I could have presets and instantly jump between different sounds. Because like personally, I use it for like gain stacking for the most part. Like I've got 3 or 4 overdrive pedals, and I can instantly jump from like my lowest to my highest gain setting, which may be 2 totally different sets of pedals. You know what I mean? So that was the whole idea behind it for me. So we released it. We built it for a little while, and then I decided I wanted to add some MIDI functionality to it. So there was like a pseudo version 2 that was kind of like teased and announced, and then that fell by the wayside while we updated all the other products to catch up before we. I've got production just started on the final version 2 of this new Nexus. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, because that's been coming soon for a while, right?
It's this page that you see here has been the same for probably a year and a half at least.
Right.
Yeah. So it's been coming soon.
I don't use a switcher, so that was another thing that you put out that I'm like, well, that'd be interesting, and it kept saying coming soon, and now that makes sense as to why.
Yeah, it was released, we sold them, and then the version 2 has been coming soon for a while because I have some prototypes, some working prototypes of some MIDI updated ones that have MIDI capabilities, but then we went back and totally revamped how we build everything. So I had to go back and totally kind of redesign the circuit behind the new manufacturing. So it was put on the back burner because I started off with some of our simpler stuff in that conversion process before trying to jump immediately to the complicated stuff and converting them all. We started off slow to make sure we knew what we were doing and didn't lose anything in the translation.
I mean, I'll add here too, because looking at this, one of the things that I love about the pedals you're doing is like the kind of the functionality. We've said that a couple of times. So for somebody who hasn't looked at this pedal yet, it's a matter of you can plug 4 pedals into it. You have 2 modes. Stop me when I mess up describing your pedal, right?
Yeah.
The last button here is going to let me switch between the live mode, or it looks like 2 different banks, maybe.
Yeah. So in order to keep it as small as possible and not take up a lot of real estate, which was very important, we actually use a combination of button presses to activate everything. So if you hit the far left button, that's loop 1. If you hit the left and the center button, that's loop 2. The middle one is 3. The middle and the right one is 4. And then the far right one is your kind of your live versus preset mode. So when that LED isn't lit up, you're in just live mode. You're controlling each loop individually with those button presses. And then you have, if you hit the right button, you're scrolling through 2 different preset modes, banks of presets. So you have 2 banks of presets, 4 presets each, 8 total. And in preset mode, whatever you saved those switches to do, they will recall. So if you're in bank 1, preset 1, if you hit preset 1 in bank 1, then it'll recall whatever loops you programmed to that switch. So say you hit the first switch and it activates 2 pedals, and you activate loop or the second set of buttons, and it activates 2 different pedals and turns those off. And so it's a way to jump between which pedals are active at a time.
And I mean, that's kind of the genius there too. We have 4 programmable loops, 4 live. If you're running them live, not using the program, you have 4 pedals, but you only have 3 switches. And yeah, I mean, there's 5 different. It's kind of brilliant to keep it that small and to give you that much functionality.
Mm-hmm.
So the only pedal you haven't talked about yet, I would guess, is this one right here.
Yep.
Yep. And I do have that one with me right now.
Nice.
The Golf.
Indeed. So the Golf, definitely came from the tremolo as far as the brains behind it goes. A lot of the digital control that we developed for the Red Mountain translated really well to the Golf. And that was another one of those pedals that I wanted. I had a Walrus Audio Julia, and I had it for a long time, and I loved it. And now there were just a couple things that I wish it did. So that led me down that path of, well, what if I designed an analog bucket brigade chorus to get that sound that I want, but then piggybacked that digital control on top and gave me the expanded features that I also wanted. So that's where that came from. And that pedal is what spurred on our V2 upgrades. So that pedal, we made quite a few for a couple months of the through hole style construction. And that took forever. Like the amount of components that were in there and that I was stuffing by hand, and how long it took me to do a batch of 10 or 15 was unreal. And I was like, I I cannot keep this up. There's no way I can keep this up. So we fulfilled all of our pre-orders and we sold them for a couple months after that. But then I was like, we got to fix something. Something's got to change. So we went back and I revamped how everything is made, totally redesigned every circuit to surface mount technology so that the majority of the small pieces are robotically placed on the circuit boards now. And then I finish them off and do the final assembly by hand and all the testing and stuff myself. But it allowed me to do a lot more of what I wanted to do, keep them the same size, but just really add some stuff that I missed. For the first 4 that we talked about, those technically didn't change at all as far as feature set or functionality or the circuits themselves. It was just the different way that they're constructed, the different way that they're built. And that would be the Iron Drive, Magic City, Mineshaft, and Workers' Comp. Those are sonically the same. But the Red Mountain, we were able to add the harmonic mode, and we were able to add MIDI capability to that pedal that it didn't have before. All of the settings on that pedal are now digitally controlled, so they're savable in the preset and controllable by MIDI. Before, there were a couple of controls that were still purely analog, so you couldn't do any digital control with them. And the same goes for the Gulf. Kind of those same updates on the Red Mountain translated to the Gulf as well and expanded that. So
it's really cool. And if you get, I don't know, if you're like me, maybe you get, I wouldn't say get nervous about the idea of MIDI, right? But it's not something I've jumped into a lot. Pat and I joke about, a lot of times we get these pedals that can do a million different things. And then we end up doing like one thing with them, right? Like I have a million presets and a million different delays, but I use this one. And so one of the things that I really like about your designs, and I think people should realize that, is like you have those options, but if you just want to be like, I'm trying to figure out a nice way to say it. You want to be simple, right? Like me.
Simpler. Yeah.
Right, because you can still set up 2 different presets. And with a simple press and holding of a button or whatever, switch to the second preset and press and hold again, switch back to the other preset. So you can still get that functionality where you're diving maybe a little bit deeper or having 2 different presets in it. But without going the route, the MIDI and stuff like that. You can do it, do it live, and you can, on the Red Mountain, it was really easy to set up like a slow tremolo with maybe more of a sine wave, so it's not a real heavy pulsating kind of thing, and has that nice slow. Plus, I get the external tap put into it, so you can tap it on the pedal, or you can tap it with an external tap. I use like one of the disaster areas clocks or whatever, right? It goes out to 2 or 3 different pedals, and it sets the tempo on that. But then I can press and hold the button and switch it over to the other channel, and that's set up with maybe a really hard tremolo at twice the speed. So some pitches are twice, so you get more of an 1/8 note instead of a 1/4 note, and so 2 really usable sounds, right? That is really easy to access, and I think that's brilliant.
Yeah. And I spend an extreme amount of time considering user interface and how easy it is for someone to access it. And like you said, that's the whole idea. None of our pedals have like screens on them or like menu systems or anything like that. I could feasibly go that route, but I just want them to be easy to use. So if you want to dive into those crazy features, you can. They're still pretty easily accessible, but if you don't care about those at all, then just use it with the foot switches and the knobs and the labeling that we got on the pedal. You can ignore all that and still use it just like you would any other pedal. Because I've got people who've requested me to add stuff like momentary bypass and some different ramping configuration options, and those are all fairly easily doable. But I haven't rolled them out yet because I haven't figured out the best way to access those for the user in an easily explainable way and an easily rememberable way. You know what I mean?
Right.
because I could say, you could hold this switch, turn the knob to this position, and double tap the switch to get, some crazy.
You'll be like the
setup.
instructions to Twister.
Right.
Exactly. So, and I don't want that. So, there's some stuff that I'm planning on trying to roll out, but I do spend a lot of time trying to think, how do I make this as easy to use as possible? Because I've got drive pedals that don't have labels on the knobs, and I can never for the life of me remember which one's volume, gain, and tone. It's 3 knobs, but just trying to remember that alone on 2 different pedals that are different is enough.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
yeah, and this is super simple. I mean, I have it sitting next to my dumb switcher. So I can
it's a technical term.
Right. I can reach over and switch between the 2 presets I have just by looking at the lights. I mean it's super simple, right? Press and hold the button. I see now I got the faster blinking light, so I know I'm on that channel. And then when I click the dumb switcher, it pops in. And according to you, afraid maybe you ought to build one of those and
call it the dictator. So you kind of answered one of the questions I like to ask. We're talking about people who are the creators, right? Like your version or your name, a version of your name is on there. So you spend most of your time kind of research and development and kind of thinking through from the end user perspective. Is that kind of your role? And you have mentioned the word we many times, and like maybe who else is in this venture with you, and how many people you've drug along this path with you to build these things.
It's been in a state of flux for a long time. I say we. So the company started with me and a buddy of mine named Sam, and Sam was really responsible for all the graphic design and kind of all the visual aesthetic that you can see, website, social media, that kind of stuff. Over time, responsibilities change and life gets in the way and things happen. And so I still, talk to him every now and then, but we don't work as much together as we used to. I had another guy who I brought in for a while that was really interested in building and got on board and really helped out. And then he kind of disappeared on me, basically. And I think I actually haven't talked to him in months. I think he moved across the country, but I'm actually not positive. I don't know, actually. And I'm actually working with a guy now I'm starting to bring on board. He used to run a small company also out of Birmingham, small pedal company. So he is knowledgeable in both the circuit side of things and in the guitar pedal world. Because it's one thing to be, involved in electrical engineering and understand circuits and stuff. And it's another to understand it from a sonic pedal perspective.
Right.
And really understanding what guitarists want. And so he's got a very similar background to me. So I'm excited to finally get him involved and trying to get him up and running. So I say we.
You're the cox.
90, other than some of the graphics that are still floating around, 95% of anything that you see is straight from me. So
also
right
hearing
here.
you talk, also, yeah, that was the thing too, is that the imagination station you're broadcasting from?
My semi-finished basement. So
according to the IRS, that is a workspace right there.
And you come to this from a electrical engineer background, right?
Yes. So I've got a degree in electrical engineering from 2013, and I still have I've got a full-time job in control systems, a company that does control systems. I do a lot of more control panel kind of municipal water treatment system design is what I do. So,
So on the creative side, you keep talking about, my board, I wanted these features. And so what is the style that you like to play? Do you get to actively gig? How does your life go musically?
So like what I imagine you guys do, I primarily play in church, praise and worship world. So I've played in a couple different bands off and on, always in that realm. So I started, in the middle school youth band. 7th grade. Is when I started doing that all through high school. And then when I got to college, I really started kind of meeting some other people who wanted to do it outside of just like whatever local church we were involved in. So I've been in a couple of different groups that do like summer camps and like college retreats and, you know, your kind of popular youth camps during the summer and that kind of stuff. So I'm still plugged in with a group of guys that are all in Birmingham. We used to kind of all go to the same church, but we've now kind of scattered to other places, but we still come together collectively and do that like for special events and stuff like that. But that's my background pretty much. I've never really played. I mean, I've jammed with some people every now and then, but I've never played extensively outside of that.
Yeah, that sounds pretty similar to my background as well. And so it's always interesting, you know, to work in our group, you know, Jason, who has maybe a background in more rock and blues and other things. It's really great to be able to just kind of draw from your experience and kind of what inspires you. So that's an interesting background. That makes sense for a lot of the pedals and a lot of the features, and very familiar with the ambient swells and things like that. And, you know, we've talked about shimmer before, and I think outside of the praise and worship space, people are like, what is shimmer?
Yeah.
To the point where a friend of mine were playing in Guitar Center in Nashville, and he was checking out a pedal that had shimmer, and I was trying to show him how it worked. And guy walks over and goes, "Were you the guys over there playing that angel pedal?" So, you know, there's certain things that only a certain group of people understand. Great. So do you get to play in a pretty heavy rotation there on Sundays, or are you kind of busy with a job and this? And
no, it's it kind of comes in waves, I guess. I used to, so the church I attend has actually got a very young population, like a lot of college students. So it kind of depends on the rotation of students that maybe come through, depending on how busy they are, if they want to get involved, what kind of talent is coming through at the time. But I've been there. Our church plant is 5 years old now, I think. I've been there since day one. So I was the first electric player they had. So I do the majority of Sundays, I would still say that I do. But we have kind of been blessed with more of a rotation lately. So takes some playing off me, I guess, but just a little more time.
So outside of full-time job, running this company, playing worship, or do you have other hobbies that you get to blow off a little steam? Or
So I actually just started drumming again. I've always wanted to pick up drumming again. I actually I have this kind of story joke that I tell, that the only reason I play guitar and not drums right now is because of that 7th grade youth band tryout. So I started playing drums in middle school band. I was on drum line all through high school. I was drum captain senior year of high school. So I've always loved it. I've always loved drumming. But in 7th grade, they were having youth band tryouts, and for some reason, I remember there being like a lot of people on drums for some reason, and like no one really trying out on electric guitar. And I tell people I was equally bad at both at the time, so I would much rather play than not play. So part of me always wonders, like, that's one of the only reasons I'm doing what I'm doing. But I started to get a little stagnant. I feel a little stuck for a while and just unmotivated, or like just uninspired, not really willing to. I was just building pedals so much, and the only time I picked up a guitar was to strum open E chords to test the pedals. So I was like, I need something different. You know, I need to get more inspired again. So I had sold my old crappy kit from high school, and I finally picked up another drum set and have really, really been enjoying getting back into that. So.
It's funny. I talked about you mirroring my path, but the guy in that other window over there might have wielded sticks before he strummed a guitar as well.
Nice.
The drum line all through. Although I played quads, which, you know, has 4 drums instead of 1. So
yeah,
but always says the snare is harder, right? But yeah, played drums all through high school. Played drums in bands. So the only time I pick up the sticks now is when our drummer, either doesn't show up on a Sunday morning or leaves early. Then sometimes I get roped into
Yep,
that.
yep.
My wife loves when that happens. But I would love to get another drum set and put in the house. Like that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'm slowly working my way up to being able to fill in like on a Sunday and stuff. I've got the ability. I just don't have the playing in a group context yet. You know what I mean? Like I've still kind of got my quote unquote chops behind me, but yeah, just that whole experience of being on your own.
It would be nice if there's 18-year-old drum corps chops back though. I don't think
you talked about checking off boxes. Go ahead.
No, I'm done.
You talk about like checking off boxes and kind of going through the world, and you're just building pedals and didn't play guitar. And to be honest, that's kind of why we started this channel, is because, you know, outside of a rehearsal, I wasn't touching a guitar. And so we had this idea to start this channel and start to play guitar again and talk about gear and get to interview. We never envisioned interviewing people like this. So this is part of why we did it too, right? To try to keep that creative spirit alive and make music something that you enjoy and not something that you have to do. And
yeah.
So that's great to hear on your side, to even branch out to drumming and just to do anything to kind of keep it fresh. And I think your pedal making and everything else will be better for it. You know, I think when you're kind of relaxed and happy, good things happen. So that's good.
For sure. Yeah, it's a good way to keep it fresh. And I'm not the most creative musically as far as like coming up with guitar parts and stuff. I find myself to be more inspired playing drums, but the creativity on the musical side, I feel like comes out more I'm more inspired in like the circuit design, like actually building pedals. Like that's where I feel like I'm actually creative, if that makes sense. Like
Absolutely. Not
the greatest player, but I feel like I actually bring something more to the table with the circuit design. So that's more inspiring to me. So it's nice. That's my outlet. Building and designing the pedals is my musical outlet, even though it's not like playing music.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great.
Very cool. I can understand that in many regards, because I don't know, just thinking about, for me, playing, like I learned to play at a blues jam, you know, from a bunch of old guys. So when we sit in the basement and play down here, or, you know, sitting by yourself, I always struggle with that. It's that I almost like that group situation much better, right? You know, like, yeah, like that works for me so much better, so much more inspiring. But this has been such a cool way to like kind of get inspired too, in many different ways. So, what else do you have over there, Pat? Anything? Looking at the time, we're about, I'm not sure. We
35-ish, I guess. I don't know. We didn't chitter chat too much up front, but you know, all the secret conversations that take place. But so you seem to be having success in this. You keep branching out. You keep making things better. I mean, you plan on just keep moving forward. Is there something bouncing around other than upgrading and continuing to add very player-friendly features? Like, just real quick, not to digress too far, but you know, we did a thing about 808s because I have an original one, and we compared it to the $25 Behringer. And for you to say that I split out those two knobs because that feels very limiting, that's great, right? Because sometimes I don't put in too much highs because I like to keep the lows, right? So for you to keep building things to people can express their creativity and maybe like not be critical of how things were done, but make them better, right? So kind of with that spirit, is there something else that you're working on that you could tell us about, or is there something knocking around in your head that maybe wouldn't be just maybe adding more features to what you've done? Is because you've got kind of the real basics, a delay and a drive and some of those other chorus. Is there other things that you're like,
Yeah, I am actually finally in a place where I'm exploring new options. Like you just said, I've spent so much time going back and upgrading and updating just out of sheer necessity. Like it just kind of had to be done, or else we were going to crash and burn and not be able to keep up. So I'm finally in a spot where I can do that. So I'm looking at, I've got this little guy is a breadboard I'm working on right now of right now the iron drive is the only dirt that we have. And it's great. It's tube screamer based. It covers a lot of what I need, but there's some stuff on the higher side that I would like to get into. So that's actually a breadboard of a kind of highly tweaked rat. So I'm looking at doing some sort of a rat type gain pedal that incorporates a lot more of the digital control that we have established with the Red Mountain and the Gulf. So, because our iron drive is just a bare bones overdrive. So I'm thinking, your presets, your MIDI control, your being able to swap between two totally different gain settings in the same pedal with the press of a switch, that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. So it won't be as like digitally controlled as like the Red Mountain or the Gulf, but having those options to really make like a live performance that much quicker and seamless. I've started looking into, so coming from the Red Mountain, coming from the Gulf, the next kind of logical step is I'm looking at some sort of a phaser idea that I've been kicking around. It's all kind of conceptual, and I'm just kind of researching and brainstorming right now. I don't have anything physical on that yet. But the control scheme lends itself really well to a phaser design. So I don't have too many concrete details on that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But something in the Phase 90 vein, just kind of your tried and true. And that's kind of my mentality, or I guess my design scheme, or whatever you'd call it.
I'm thinking
I'm not
too with all those controls. There could be some
it's just like
advantages and some kind of crazy univibe pedal too.
Yeah, I'm not the. So I feel like I'm creative in the way to access ideas to their fullest potential. In a way, that's kind of where my design scheme comes from. I'm not your guy that comes up with the craziest, wackiest new sounds. The Maris type stuff, the Old Blood type stuff. Right. These like new sounds, Earthquaker. Yeah, these like crazy, different, unique sounds that no one's ever heard of. I don't classify myself as being the best at that. My bread and butter is more kind of finding your tried and true, agreed upon great pedals and exploiting them to do as much as they possibly can, like really opening them up in ways that like no one's ever been able to access them before, or been able to utilize them before.
Actually, is that the way you can access and the way you can? That would be cool. But I mean, the phaser, univibe, of course, all in that thing.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm looking at a couple of options. Phaser and univibe are fairly similar when you get down to it in certain ways. So I'm looking at some ways to route the digital control to kind of have a pseudo phaser univibe switch to kind of swap between the two in a way. So, or at least get that realm of sounds out of it. So
Jason's trying to lead you down the path to make a Leslie pedal, if you want to know the truth.
Leslie pedal.
Yeah.
We have 25 of them currently, so we're pretty set on Leslie pedals. So
nice.
We're doing a series about that. But that's cool, man. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, it's great. I totally am impressed with what you're doing as far as like, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I just might be able to make it a little better or a little more functional, or, take some of these things that were one trickish pony or whatever, and find all of the variables and put them in a way that you can access them, right? Like, when you phase 90, it's got one switch. I mean,
exactly,
one knob. So what else does it do that you can make it do without having to touch the knob with your foot?
Mm-hmm.
That was the first, big sticky pedal you can try to catch with your foot. So yeah, I love what you're doing. That's great.
Yeah. I can't get with like the Boss modulation pedal, right? That has every different modulation sound in it, and you have all the presets. And for some reason, I mean, maybe it's the same reason I can't go Kemper from, like, I still want to have a tube amp, right? Maybe it's the same kind of thing, but then to have like the one trick pony, all right, so I have a chorus pedal right here, but I can still access those things, right? Like I can still set up a couple presets. I can still have a couple of different things. I love it. I think it's awesome.
Well, you could set it up like you have 4 different chorus pedals on your board, and it's in one with a couple clicks of the switches. So it's great.
Right.
Yeah, there's that. It's just that nice middle ground. You know, you get the crazy digital pedals, and you almost have option paralysis, and you don't know if what you're doing is good anymore. Like the limitations of having that box only being that one effect. I try to not have too many limitations in it. I want it to do everything it could possibly do, but because you know that like I'm dealing with a chorus pedal, and I don't worry, would maybe phase sound better? Would vibrato sound better here? Would harmonic tremolo sound better? It's like, no, this is a chorus pedal. It's going to do a chorus pedal.
Computer and go into all the presets and start tweaking every little parameter.
Yeah.
Well, you're speaking our language, right? Because you know, I have a Electro-Harmonics Canyon. It's got 11 different things. I use it for one thing. You could go down our pedal boards and be like, it slices, it dices, it does whatever, but I use it for this one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can appreciate, you know, that you don't want to go too wide. You want to stay where you are and make it as useful as possible. That's a great philosophy.
Yeah, I don't really ever picture myself doing any like multi effects or any like combination of things. I really want someone to be like, I want a chorus pedal. I want to find the best chorus pedal there is, and hopefully they land on the Gulf and they're like, that chorus does everything I would ever want a chorus to do, but it's simple, it's analog signal path, it's classic. You know what I mean? It's classic, but it does everything I would need, and that's the mindset behind everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
without being like it does everything on the entire board that I would ever need. You know what I mean?
Right.
No, I think it's great, and that's why we asked you to do this, because we're fans. So are you pretty good over there, Pat?
I am. I thought it was great the way that you kind of explained your philosophy. I guess I have one burning question. Like, how did you find our video where I said bad things about your pedal? It was kind of weird. All of a sudden, Jason's like, "Hey, I just got a message." Wait,
yeah,
what?
I'm trying to remember. So
did we tag? We might have.
You might have.
I don't know. So I try to not Google myself. That's
probably a good idea.
That's never a great idea. But every now and then, I'll let myself either search Swindler on YouTube or on Reddit, just to see if there's some advice or some information I could offer. You know, we're not big enough that we get like a ton of people talking about us on forums or anything. Not that I know of, not that I've found. Right. But there's been a couple times like I've searched for Swindler on some Reddit subreddits, and I've been able to offer some people that didn't fully understand things. Because again, our pedals are kind of complicated in a way when you get into those deep features. So I've been able to kind of offer advice and help people that were spreading misinformation or stuff like that.
Well, so part of the reason go ahead.
Well, I think it was one of those. I was on YouTube one day. I was probably bored at work, didn't have probably much to do. So I think I searched Swindler on YouTube, and I was just scrolling through, and I think I saw y'all's, and I had never seen that video. I didn't know it existed. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is new. Someone that I didn't like reach out to, be like, hey, would you demo this? And, y'all did it on your own. So I watched it, and I saw your comments, and I was like, that's interesting. I wonder how old it is, because your comments sound just like some of the comments we got way back when of people who had the same complaint. I mean, it was a worthwhile, totally understandable complaint. And I was like, I should reach out and see if I can help this, or see if I can see what's going on, or maybe why they're experiencing this. So
and that's more the reason I asked the question, because the way you handled it was brilliant, especially because I think it's Jason's not the original owner, right? So here's a guy that bought pedal secondhand. You see the comment, you reach out, you offer to fix it. You had it back in like 5 days or some crazy like short turnaround, and then like we reshot it, and and you were kind enough to help us get the golf in so we could talk about that one. It was great. Like we were so, first of all, I wasn't totally embarrassed, but I was like, oh crap, because we're trying to be positive. We want to be honest, but we want to be positive. And I'm like, here's the guy that designed the pedal. Oh boy. But I just love the way you handled it. The pedal sounds completely different. It sounds great. And
that's good. I appreciate that. Like it's, you always kind of wonder when people have demos made that they have reached out to the person. How honest is that demo? How honest is that review? Am I getting a good representation of, am I going to like this pedal or not? So it actually is nice. I would rather appreciate the honesty if I were watching your video and want to know, like, is this going to be the pedal for me? But yeah, on the other side of that, it's that whole small business mentality. Like, I'm just one guy and I want to make the best stuff I possibly can. And because it's pretty much just me, like it's my name I'm putting out there. It's like, it's my reputation. It's my baby. It's my product that I'm putting out there. So I stand by things as much as I possibly can. If someone has an issue, I try to fix it or I'll try to replace it. If I find out that something is wrong with something down the road, I'll try my best to go back and fix it on as many people's pedals that are having that problem, so it's just standing by your product in the end. It's really trying to put customer service or customer support up front. And yeah, I just, I don't want like if you were not happy with your Red Mountain and you sold it without knowing that there was a fix for it, without me saying, hey, let me fix it for you, and you sold it, then someone else would potentially not be happy with it.
Right.
And who knows, they go on a forum and badmouth it like crazy, because in this culture, people will complain about anything. They'll complain so much quicker than praising.
Sure.
So, the last thing you want to do is to have something that is not representative of what you're currently making, and people reading forum posts and be like, hey, I read that this is a piece of crap and I don't want to buy that. It's like, well, that's not a fair, so it's really, if you take care of people and you do it up front and try to catch it quickly and make sure everyone is taken care of, then you can avoid a lot of that, like backlash that can come from a unresolved issue, so.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. I mean, that it did it. Whatever you did, whatever little magic you worked in there, added the and Pat's so much better at that than I am. Like, I didn't realize it was the lack of the bass response that was just why I wasn't quite getting where I wanted to be with it. But I'll tell you, now that it's there, totally different ballgame. So
yeah,
and that's kind of why we reached out to do this. So the whole idea here was to get this little interview with you, talk to you about your pedals, that you share some about what you're doing. Hopefully some of the people that are watching our channel, and that is growing significantly since the first time we've talked. It has probably doubled or tripled, which is really cool to see. And so hopefully some of those people will be able to see this and maybe dive into those pedals a little bit. I know. Go ahead.
People are watching it. I actually want to tell you, I got an email. It was either today or yesterday of someone asking me about some Red Mountain features and asking me to clarify some things. And they straight up, they referenced, because I watched the PJ and the Beard video, I'm curious about such and such. So I got that email either today or yesterday.
That's funny.
That's great.
I'll have to thank my mom for sending that to me on the eve of our interview.
That's funny.
Well,
this has been great, man. This is fantastic. So,
yeah, and I'll point out here, not to push people away from our channel in any way, but I did notice when you go through all the pedals on the website, and let's put the website up here. When you go through all the pedals on the store, Roman from, was it Chernobyl Tone or whatever, is probably demoing all your pedals, and that guy, I mean, I'll straight up say the reason I bought the Red Mountain in the first place was watching his review of that. So he does some great reviews. You have them, I think, on most of those pedals in there. So if there's one we haven't done that people want to see, that would be I highly recommend watching his videos.
Mm.
So with that, I think, being pretty much an hour into this, we should probably wrap it up, because who knows if anybody's attention span is this long on YouTube. So if you're still here, we'd love for you to subscribe. We have more interviews coming and all the other stuff that we've been doing. Hit the like button, go to Instagram or Facebook and follow those. But more importantly, make sure you stop by swindlereffects.com, check out any of his social media, and kind of get hip to what Drew's doing over there.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Now it's my turn to remind everybody that no matter what you hear, you never have too much gear. Peace out.